Okay, guys, let's take a look at the wheel and axle example that you have. It's important that you know where exactly to get your numbers from for the wheel and axle problems. If you notice, the formulas are the same. For IMA, you have your formula is distance of your effort divided by your distance of your resistance. And for AMA, your formula is the same. You're dealing with forces, not distances. Force of resistance divided by force of effort. Okay, so there are your formulas. The problem with with the wheel and axle is that you're getting your numbers from a little bit different places, because what we're doing here is we're actually comparing the circumference for distances. We're comparing the circumference of the effort divided by the circumference of the resistance. In other words, the circumference, let's just say you're pushing on this wheel on the outside. So if you're pushing right here where the arrow is, you're pushing and you're turning this wheel in a circular motion. So that's why we're interested in knowing what the circumference, in this case, of the outside of that wheel is. Okay? Because as you push the wheel in a circular shape, the axle, which is down on in the middle here where you have that yellow triangle, the yellow triangle actually is referring to what we would call the fulcrum of a lever. Okay? But when you turn the wheel one full circle, the axle also turns one full turn. Okay, it turns at the same rate. So if we know the circumference of the wheel and the circumference of the axle, we can compare those two and get our IMA again. So when we calculate the circumference, now I'm going to move down here. When we calculate the circumference of a wheel, we use this formula right here. Pi times the diameter of, in this case we're going to say it's the wheel. Sometimes you could use the axle as your effort. You're turning on the smaller part in the middle, and then that turns the outer part. It's more common, probably, to use the wheel as your effort, and the axle then turns off the wheel. A car actually is the opposite. A car turns the axle, and then the axle turns the wheel. But let's just say we're going to use the wheel as our effort force. We need to find the circumference of the wheel, that is pi times the diameter of the wheel. Okay? We can compare that to the circumference of the axle and use pi times the diameter of the axle. Okay? Now when we do that, you'll notice in this next part here that we have pi times the effort diameter divided by pi times the resistance diameter. Pi is 3.14, and 3.14 divided by 3.14 cancels out. So really all we need is the diameter of the wheel and the diameter of the axle. Okay? Or we can say all we need is the radius of the wheel and the radius of the axle, because it's gonna be the same anyway. Okay, there's a relationship, a ratio to each other, and so if we know the the radius, we can use those numbers. Here we have the radius of the wheel is 20 inches, and the radius of the axle is 6 inches. Okay, so this is the one that I'm doing right down here. 20 inches divided by 6 inches is 3.33. If we had it the opposite way, where we were actually turning on the axle would be our effort force, and that in turn would turn the wheel, then it would be the opposite. Your effort distance would be 6 inches, the radius of the axle, divided by 20 inches, the radius of the wheel. Okay? That would give us a different answer. But we're just going to let's just stick with the top, with the one we were working on here, this bottom one. Okay? 20 divided by 6 is 3.33. AMA, all we're doing is we're comparing the forces. Okay, so the force of the wheel and the force of the axle, the force of the resistance and the force of our effort. What is the AMA? What is the AMA if the wheel is driving the axle? Okay, if the wheel is driving the axle, we have the force of our effort is 200 divided by the force of our, force of resistance divided by your force of your effort. Your force of resistance is coming from the axle. That is this number right here. Okay, it's kind of hard to see. I'm trying to highlight it. 200. And your force of your effort is right here, 70. So we have 200 divided by 70 gives you 2.86. Okay. Efficiency, AMA divided by IMA. We just calculated the AMA is 2.86 divided by 3.33. This number right here, 3.33, 2.86. 2.86 divided by 3.33 gives us 0.859. Multiplied by 100 is 85.9%. Okay? Do lots of problems. Ask lots of questions on the wheel and axle. I know it's a little bit more confusing than the ramp, the lever, and the pulley, but not that hard. Just try to understand it. Do lots of questions. Do lots of examples. Ask lots of questions. You guys can do this.